Hey everyone, my name is Rachel and today I'm going to be talking about books again. So I didn't actually make a kind of wrap-up video at the end of March. I don't know why, but I didn't. So today I'm going to be talking about a couple of the books I read throughout March and April. It was a busy couple of months in terms of like how much I read, because I read quite a lot of graphic novels. I didn't read much non-fiction, but I did read quite a lot of fiction and even a really cool short story series. So let's get into talking about them. So first of all, back in March, I got back into reading my absolute favourite comic book graphic novel series of all time, Fables. If you don't know Fables, it's about all your favourite fairy tale and mythology and legend characters who have all been banished from their homelands and are now living in New York City, kind of in current day and kind of hiding away from our world. It's really, really cool. It takes a lot of the kind of classic fairy tales and brings in the kind of darker elements of them with a lot of action. There's some violence at times. There's a little bit of romance, a little bit of magic, a little bit of fantasy, a little bit of horror in places. And it also ties really well into kind of like our own history and bringing the fairy tale characters into how they played a part in our world. So I read Fairest volume 2 through to 4, Fables volume 14 through to 20, Fables, Werewolves of Heartland and Jack of Fables volumes 7 and 8. So that's quite a lot of books there, but I really, really enjoyed them. When I kind of start reading Fables, I just get really into it and I kind of tear through them all really quickly. I love the art style, I love the storytelling. I find the pacing of the stories is generally really, really good. There's a lot of action in a very kind of small space, but it doesn't feel too quick. Jack of Fables I kind of struggled with a little bit in the beginning because Jack just isn't one of my favourite characters, but they made an interesting switch partway through this series to switch from the kind of original Jack that we knew towards his kind of illegitimate son, which was really cool because that Jack is kind of like a good guy, he's a proper hero, he really does try. And it kind of made for a nice change of pace, which I thought was good. Fairest is a really good series that I like because it focuses on the women in fairy tales, which is sometimes overlooked in favour of, you know, the handsome prince who swoops down to save the day. But Fairest really shows kind of like these strong women kind of winning and looking after themselves, women who look after their families, fight for themselves, who fight in wars, who can use magic and be just as tough or tougher than men, and it's really cool. So the whole like Fable series were books I read throughout May, and in April the graphic novels I read were Kick-Ass, which I honestly didn't know anything about going in. I've not seen the film, but I've heard very good things, and I didn't know anything about the books or the comics, but again I'd heard good things, and I really, really enjoyed like this volume. I thought it was really, really good. I just found it all kind of like really unexpected in places. Nothing was predictable, which was really cool. A lot of action going on. I was a little bit unsure about it at first, like I didn't really like the main character, but ultimately I thought like the relationships and the dynamics between the characters worked really well and it made for just a really cool story. Other than that, I read another one of my favourite kind of comic book series, which is Adventure Time. So I read volume 1 ages ago, and I recently got volume 2 and 3 here, and I read these and they're so good. I love them. They really capture the kind of spirit and the energy of the show so well. They capture the characters' voices so perfectly. They're really, really funny. I was reading these on holiday by the pool and like just sat there giggling to myself, and everyone was giving me funny looks because I'm this like grown woman reading children's comics, laughing away to myself in public, but it was so good. Volume 2 has this kind of like time travel storyline in it. Volume 3 deals with a virus that's taken over BMO and basically the fight to save BMO and all the other robots. It starts with a really cute little kind of standalone issue, which is like a choose your own adventure, so you go through and, you know, it's just a kind of general sort of fight against the Ice King kind of thing, but you do get your own choices and you can kind of pick the story and how it goes and what happens. So, you know, you can pick whether they go to Flame Princess or Princess Bubblegum, or you can choose to take the Ice King with you or leave him behind and things like that. You can choose to punch him or not punch him, like, and there's silly things like that. But it's really cute. The artwork in all of these is absolutely fantastic, and I gotta say, these are definitely some of my favourite comics I've ever read, and I definitely want to continue reading the series. Moving on to books with a little bit more meat to them and talking about some novels. One of the first novels I read back in March, which I don't have with me because it was a library book, was The Paying Guests by Sarah Waters. I've read a few of her books, she's really cool. She tends to set her books kind of between the 20s and the 40s. A lot of the time it's kind of around the wars, during the wars, or something like that. Or at least the ones of hers that I've read are all set around that time. They tend to be quite long books, but I get really into them and I don't really realise how long they are. This one was really cool. It was about a mother and daughter who, after the father dies and they're kind of struggling for money, they decide to take in kind of two lodgers, which is a young couple. And it's interesting that it kind of combines this idea of like historical fiction with romance with a murder mystery, kind of in a way, or at least like kind of some sort of crime book. I got really kind of involved in this book and invested in the characters, and I really wanted to know what happened. I would definitely recommend Sarah Waters to like anyone, she's so good. Next up I read A Lovely Way to Burn by Louise Welsh. Louise Welsh is one of my favourite authors again. I've read pretty much everything she's written, and this was a newer series that I hadn't really heard of before, and it's part of this series called Plague Times, which is set after this kind of virus. Well, it starts to infect people, make them ill, and a huge amount of the population die. This first book follows this one woman who somehow she gets the illness and survives, and she's like one of the only people that's happened to, if maybe even the only person, I'm not sure. But at the same time she's kind of investigating the potential murder of her boyfriend and looking into this kind of big sort of conspiracy and cover-up that's been happening within the medical industry, which doesn't really have anything to do with the whole virus and the plague. That's just sort of a backdrop to the main story. It was a really different take on this whole kind of like dystopian present virus has taken over the world kind of thing, and I really enjoyed it. The whole tone and the writing style was a little bit different from what I'm used to from Louise Welsh, but I actually found it really refreshing and I enjoyed it. She kind of stepped away from this sort of flowery language, and she kind of got straight to the facts and the action and what was happening and what people were feeling, and like she really captured the tone of kind of a distraught London really well, which I really enjoyed. I can't wait to read the second one in the series, to be honest. Very excited for that. Next up is a book that I do have in front of me, which is called Everything But the Truth by Gillian McAllister. It's about this young couple, Rachel and Jack, who are having a baby together, and she starts to discover that he's kind of lying to her about things, and there's kind of hidden stuff in his past, and she takes it upon herself to pretty much like internet stalk him to hell and figure out what he's hiding from her, which I think is completely fair. And I kind of felt like this book was kind of so realistic, because when you feel like someone's lying to you, I totally get the kind of paranoia and the crazy she was feeling. It felt very real. I'll be honest, it wasn't the best book I've ever read. There's probably several others out there very similar. There are several others out there that I've read that are very similar. But as an enjoyable book that was kind of a little bit thrilling, a little bit intriguing, I really enjoyed it and I thought it was pretty awesome, so I'd give it a read if you got it. A book I read that I was a little bit more disappointed with was Pig Island by Hayder. Now the premise of this sounded really good, so I was really excited to read it, even though again it was like a big chunky book. So basically it's about this journalist who goes to this kind of secluded island to help this cult, because he kind of wants to investigate them and find out what's going on, but they kind of enlist his help to help with kind of like good publicity and helping them raise some money and things like that. And I thought this would be a really cool kind of like dark, creepy horror story, because there's all these conspiracies around the island and this monster that's been seen on there. I thought it would be really cool, really creepy. I kind of get really intrigued by the idea of cults and stuff because I find them so horrifying, basically. I really don't like them, which is why I kind of love reading about them in horror books, if that makes any sense. So I thought this book was going to be so good. And the first half was great. And then the second half, when kind of things started to get revealed, I just didn't really enjoy it. It turned into kind of like a bit of a weird romance with like all this horrible drama, and the wife of the journalist himself was one of the most annoying characters I've ever read. The chapters narrated by her were just absolutely awful, I couldn't stand them. And then the ending, again, there was this little twist, and I was like, well, I kind of started to see that coming, but it's a bit like, meh. And I just didn't really enjoy it. Like, honestly, if you're looking for a cool, creepy book about cults, this is not it. I feel like this video has taken quite a kind of like meh sort of turn. I should have started with the meh ones and then gone on to the good ones at the end. But oh well. Next up is a book that I read on holiday, which is Reader, I Married Him, which is a collection of short stories inspired by Jane Eyre. So I quite like my short story collections. I'm not sure I prefer them to a novel, but I do enjoy them every now and again. And Jane Eyre is my absolute all-time favourite book, so I was really excited to give this a try. I came away feeling a bit like there were some good points in it, and there were some low points as well. Some of the stories I really enjoyed as standalone pieces. Some of them I thought gave a really cool new perspective on the kind of story of Jane Eyre, like the story from the perspective of Grace Poole. There's one from the perspective of Rochester himself, and there's another one written from Jane's perspective, and it kind of really sort of messes with you a little bit and kind of twists the original story, and it's really kind of cool, and I really enjoyed those. There were some where I couldn't quite see the connection to the original book, or if I could, I thought the link was a little bit loose and they were kind of like grasping a bit, and it just didn't quite work. Overall, I found a lot of the stories were kind of like a little bit disheartening, because for me, like, Jane and Rochester have this like really amazing love story, and I love that. So I found a lot of these stories focusing on these kind of loveless marriages out of duty was just kind of like a bit of a downer and really sad. That said, the last story, I wasn't a huge fan of it most of the way through, but the end at least was really uplifting, and that was a nice way to end it, I thought, so that was okay. Last book I want to talk about is an ebook that I read, and it's one that I've heard a lot of hype around, and that is The Girls by Emma Cline. So I had a lot of hype around this, but I didn't actually know what the book was about, like, for some reason, don't ask me why. I was like, you know what, I'm going to get the ebook, I'm going to read it on holiday, and just see where it takes me. And I have mixed feelings. I wouldn't say it's this amazing 5-star book that everyone says it is, but it's not a bad book either. It's just not a great book. So The Girls is a story told in parallel from a woman now who's kind of like a little bit lost with her life, retelling the story of her kind of teenage years back in the 60s. And when she was 14, she basically joined a cult for the summer. And see, it's back to this cult theme, I don't know what it is. But she basically joined a cult for the summer, and it turns out they were involved in some pretty kind of like messed up stuff. The premise behind the story I found really interesting, and I understand the kind of parallels they put in there with the story of her today and her past, and I feel like it could have worked well, but honestly I felt the kind of like present day bits were just a bit unnecessary, and I didn't really enjoy them that much. In terms of the bits set in the 60s around the cult and the things like that, just, I don't know, I feel like maybe I'm a little bit too old to read these kind of books with this like angsty teenage narrator, because she just annoyed me a little bit and I didn't like her that much. I just wanted to feel like, oh, for God's sake, just grow up. Like, grow up, get over it, just yeah. I didn't really like the writing style too much. Again, I felt it was kind of like overly flowery, trying to be a little bit pretentious and trying to be like really deep and meaningful, and it just, it felt like it was trying too hard, to be honest. And the whole kind of story with the cult and stuff, I thought it had a lot of potential, but it didn't quite live up to it. I wish it was maybe a little bit more shocking, a little bit more showing, well, I guess you could say it shows a very dark side of cults, but I wish it kind of showed it a little bit more from the perspective of the kind of like manipulation of its members and things like that. I think it could have gone a lot darker in that respect. Overall, like, it was an okay book, but I don't think it's quite worth all the raving I've heard about it. Sorry this video is so long. They are pretty much all the books I read throughout March and April this year. Let me know what you've been reading down in the comments below. Let me know if you've read any of these books and what you think of them. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe for more videos about books and makeup and clothes and all the things I'm interested in. Maybe I'll do some music videos, maybe I'll do some photography videos, maybe I will do some other videos where I just ramble in front of a camera. Who knows, we'll see. But for now, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.